Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Hands on SAP Dev with me, DJ QMacro. I'm coming to you from, well, the same location, but a slightly different setup. This is my last month in this location. I'm going to be moving, and I'm sort of half packed already. So some of my equipment is already packed up, like my Stream Deck, so I can't press the buttons to go between different scenes and everything. So, and also, I've packed away my fantastic Blue Yeti microphone and arm. So I've got this camera here, which is the Logitech StreamCam. It's a great camera, but I've got it a bit nearer, so hopefully you can hear me better, because the microphone on this camera is good. It's not as good as the Yeti. Anyway, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. Good morning, Visas in Thailand, and good morning, Helmut in Brunswick, Germany. So thank you for joining. This is the fourth and final episode in this little mini series. It's turned out to be a mini series, hasn't it? On managed associations. So yeah, we've been diving in, and we're just about to really get our brains around this sort of central link entity for a many-to-many relationship between two entities, you know, in a managed way. So yeah, we're going to finish that off today. I think this might even be shorter than 1 hour, because we've got three more steps, maybe 3 or 4 more steps, and that's it. So welcome anyway. Thank you for joining. Welcome, Bruno. Good morning to you. Hope you're well. Hope you're all well. I've got my coffee. I've just had a piece of toast actually, so I've not got anything to eat, but should be okay. Let me just have a little drink of coffee first. Ahoy to you, HP in Mannheim. Excellent. One of my favourite places. In fact, I'm staying in Mannheim in the next. Where am I? Sometime this month. I can't remember. I'm going to the mothership. I'm going to. What am I doing? I'm doing a code jam in Gütersloh, and then I'm going down to the mothership, down to Waldorf, doing something internally there. And I think I'm staying in Mannheim on the way back up, on the way to the Frankfurt airport in the early morning for an early morning flight. Lewis, good morning. Is applesauce B in another great session? Is that like an autocorrect thing? Anyway, let me just switch, not with my Stream Deck, with my mouse over onto Streamlabs desktop. Switch to the main scene. There we go. Yes, on the main scene. Good morning, John Murray. Welcome to you. I guess you're coming into us maybe from the northeast. I'm not sure. You're welcome wherever you are. So I've just posted in the chat a link to this week's SAP Developer News. There's Mamiki looking splendid on our news episode this week, so check that out. But generally, I think we should get going. I mean, I've got it all ready. I've got it all set up here, but we'll come back to that in a second. But just as a bit of a recap on what we've been doing. By the way, again, like I say, one of the other things that I've packed up already, so I've packed up my proper Blue Yeti microphone, I've packed up the Stream Deck, I've also packed up the Elgato Key Light, which was really good, so I really struggled getting the light right with this green screen behind me. All the way from sunny Sunderland. Excellent. Yes, exactly. The sun in Sunderland is not insignificant. So just let me know if there's any tears up here. My chair is right back against this green screen, so I can't really move very well. Anyway, enough of the meta. So we've got this repo, we've got a couple of basic entities, books and authors, and we went through the whole process of relating them through managed associations. And now we're getting to the stage, I think we got to 14. We got to the stage where we started to think about relating the book's entity and the author's entity, not to each other, but to each other via, sort of indirectly, via this link entity, right? And that's what we did. And in fact, let us go over here. So this is the state that we left it right at the end of last week, okay? So we've got, nothing's changed in the schema. So we've got those two entities, very simple, just with a key property and a title or a name property, a string. we've got those two entities exposed in this service called Z. And remember, I call it Z just so it's a super short name in the URL. And then we're using the extend CDS file to sort of tiptoe around the service layer, main CDS, and also the persistence layer, the DB layer entities, right? So we're just extending. So we're bringing in the bookshop namespace from that DB schema. We're extending the bookshop books, i.e. this entity here, with an author's property, and that property ends up as a navigation property, as we know, and it goes now to, it's a one-to-many association, it now goes to this new entity that we've defined in this extend file, right? This book's authors entity, which is this link entity. So both of the books and authors entities that are in here, effectively, this is where they live, they've now got each one single navigation property, and each of these properties has a plural name because it's a too many. And then there is a reverse association from this link entity, books authors, that points back to them. Okay, and we had that sort of reverse association. Sorry, not association. That reverse relationship when we had the books and authors sort of cross-linked. Okay. Good morning, Javier. Good morning from sunny and warm Barcelona. In fact, we were just talking about how wonderful Barcelona is last night at dinner. Yes, one of my favorite places. Welcome, Javier. So that's where we were, and what had happened was when we made this modification, okay, what happened was it said, no, let's just move that here a bit. Yeah, there we go. No OData navigation property generated. Target books authors is outside of service Z. Right? We get the same warning again because it's it's from a different perspective, right? Anyway, and we discussed why that was, or why that is. Still, at the moment, we've got this books authors link entity that is the joining factor, the joining mechanism between the author's property and the book's property, right? But we're not exposing these books authors link entity. It's not in the service. So from an EDMX perspective, at the OData level, there can be no navigation properties. There can be no relationships defined or declared or made real. We know what we have to do there. We have to expose this book's authors entity in the service, right? Which we'll do shortly. But what we also had, where we ended up last week, was we had this error, right? Good morning, Marianne. Welcome, Marianne. Good morning. We had this error because, of course, it's trying to load automatically the data from, in this case, bookshop books, DB data bookshop books. Well, let's have a look at that. Bookshop books, bookshop books. There we go. That's what's in there. Don't need that anymore. That's what's in there. Currently, in there, of course, we have 3 fields: ID, title, and author underscore ID. And that author underscore ID is, or let's say, was only there to satisfy the books to authors one-to-one association that we had before, right? When books was directly associated with authors, the two entities, and it was a one-to-one relationship, we put in this author ID field, okay? But now we don't have that books to authors one-to-one relationship anymore between the two entities directly. We have got a relationship between this link entity. We'll come to that shortly, right? The CSV loader is saying, author ID, I don't know where to put this. There isn't an equivalent property in the target entity in the persistence layer. So what's going to happen? So what we want to do is, for the time being, for this, to resolve this part of the step, we just need to get rid of that. Now, of course, you know me, we could just go and do some editing and remove this column here, remove comma author ID, remove comma 101, remove comma 107 and everything. but that would be quite boring. And obviously that really doesn't scale on a large data. And what happens if we wanted to remove title instead of author? So what I've done, as you can probably guess, let me just create a new full-size terminal. And we've got, in fact, I can probably, let's get rid of that for a second. We've got here csvdel. Remember that one we had csv get data? That's the thing there. Let me put that over there so it's not behind my head. That thing there is what we use to go and grab the data from actually another repo. And it uses this, does it use this? Yes, it does. It uses Miller, which is an awesome CSV utility. So sort of chop and change and slice and dice all the CSV data and repurpose it. So we use that to fill the thing. But I've also got a script called csvdelfield, which again, is just slightly gratuitous, but it helps me figure out how Miller works, the sorts of things I can do with it. It might help all of us, scaling this sort of CSV data and field management up to a slightly higher level. And, why not? Scripts, bash scripts, beautiful. Anyway, so all this does is it will effectively delete a column from a CSV file, right? Got this little main function, you have to specify a CSV file, it will go and look in that CSV file. If we don't specify a field that we want to delete, it will just cat out that file with Miller, right, and just take the first line, which will show us the actual list of the fields, as in it'll show us ID, title, author ID. But if we do specify a field we want to delete, then it will use the Miller command again with the cut subcommand to say cut out this field. And it will spit it out to the temp file, which will then rename to the original file, and it'll spit it to the terminal as well. So let's run that because why not, right? So let's bring that terminal back up again. If we run utils csvdelfield, it'll tell us specify CSV file db data bookshops books.csv. So we're not going to specify a field at the moment. So what I'll do, it'll use Miller to basically process. I mean, there's loads of different ways. You can get Miller to sort of make it tabular, beautiful, print it onto the terminal, everything. It's really cool, Miller. Miller CSV. Let me tell you about Miller. There we go. Look at that, Miller. Definitely worth a look this weekend if you fancy it. Read the docs, Miller. There we go. Let's put it in there. Excellent. Right. So I'm going to say author ID to delete, right? And watch up there above my head. That should, there we go, remove that field. Okay. I wonder, what time is it? Yeah, 8:30. Yeah, no, fine. Okay, so there we go. A little bit of fun, really. So we've removed that field. Now, again, because we're still running CDS Watch, it's noticed that one of the CSV files has changed, so it's reloaded that and reloaded the cap server and re-pulled in the CSV, and it's not got an error anymore, so we're all good. And now also, but don't forget, also we still have this warning to deal with. Okay, so far so good. Any questions so far? I think that was quite simple. Let's have a look here, right? So we got that. This, what I've just done, I think, yes, is explained here in step 14. By the way, shall I just share a link to that guide there in the chat? This is what we're working through, their guide. I made a few changes to this during this week. Hopefully some improvements, a little bit of clarification and stuff. So the problem at the moment with the let's go down there, move that out of the way. Don't need that. Move that there, with that, The problem at the moment is the target books authors, the target of these managed associations is outside of Service Z. So in order to resolve that, we need to put it in. So in Service Z. So what we could do is we could say here entity, books authors, etc., right? But we don't want to do that. Again, this is just sort of along the lines of the philosophy we talked about before, about treading lightly on stuff we already have, right? And also it allows us to think about another flavor of extend, which is extend service. I guess I was thinking about this just before. I guess if you don't specify the type of thing you want to extend, like here, this is just me guessing now, just thought of this, then it's going to default to extend entity. I wonder if you could say extend entity, right? Maybe extend is a short form for extend entity. You're going to extend entities probably more often than you're going to extend services. I don't know, I'm just making this up. But we have to specify extend service Z, right? In fact, and there we go, extend service Z with something, right? Is it bookshops? No, bookshop, that's fine, extend service Z. But what we need to do as well is bring in, because that Z is underlined, isn't it? It's like, what is that? What is that? Right? Using from main. There we go. So now let's move that down a bit. So Z is now not sort of, or warning, danger, danger. So now we can sort of add our entity projection in the Z service by extending that service in extend.cds instead of going and over, modifying this main.cds, right? Again, I think it's a bit neater. So entity, let's call it LinkEntity. I think that's what I'll call it in the guide. Entity as projection on. Now we just need to point to books authors. That's it. Now let's see what happens as soon as we save this. I've got this autosave turned off on this particular VS Code instance. So let's move that up there and save that. Boing. Going to regenerate, and now we don't have that warning anymore. We do have another warning, right? And this is sort of to be expected because we haven't defined any of the either. What's the word I'm looking for? None of the properties in the book's author's entity definition is defined as being a key property, all right, which is quite unusual. Now, in this case, we're using this as a sort of a go-between, a link entity. So we don't really have the concept. I mean, both are effectively keys. I suppose you could define them both as keys. Interesting. We'll try that later, maybe. But we're not using this as an entity with a primary key, and it's telling us here, oh, warning, expected entity to have primary key in entity Z linked entity. But we can ignore that for now. Okay. And now look at, well, in fact, let's look at it in the $metadata document. And here, I think there's a link here to the $metadata document. In fact, there's an example of in fact, the localhost 4004 $metadata. Look at that. Look at all. In fact, that's perfectly on one page as well. Let me get rid of the bookmarks so we have slightly more space. So now we get this sort of beautiful balanced relationship. So let's have a look at the this new thing, been newly exposed, right? There's the new entity type. The name is LinkEntity, and all it consists of is a pair of navigation properties. And each navigation property, of course, is a pair of navigation property definition and a property definition. And it sort of stands to reason. You got the name book. That is exactly the reference to the element name in the entity. What is it of type? It's of type books, obviously. Interestingly, this partners, basically I was reading up on what this partner attribute in the metadata XML is. It basically is a way of sort of, it's too long to explain in detail now, but it sort of says, oh, there's a way back to the original entity. And you see it there as well, book. Anyway, and within that navigation property, we have, of course, the referential constraint, which is, well, when we point to the books entity instance, then the ID in that entity instance needs to have the same value as the book ID, right? Again, we've looked at this before when we had the cross relationship between books and authors, so that's all cool. we have the same thing here. We've got an author navigation property with an author ID property name sibling, and that does the same thing. And not only that, in the books entity type and the authors entity type, we've now got back navigation properties, but this time both these navigation properties are pointing to something of type link entity, right? Both of them say, ooh, link entity, link entity, link entity. Notice as well that there's no generated underscore ID property here, like we have, for example, here, property name author ID, because these are too many associations. We learned last week, or was it the week before? I can't remember. We've learned on this series anyway, that it's only on a 2-1 association that it even makes sense to have a scalar generated something underscore ID to hold an ID field, because of course if it's a too many, it doesn't make sense, right? So far so good. So we've got this wonderful collection of relationships in the metadata, even in the entity container, right? Look at the entity container, how wonderful is that? It's a beautiful sort of balanced thing. We've got 3 entity sets: link entity, books entity, and authors entity, right? And they're sort of all pointing to each other in this sort of amazing, beautiful thing. Okay, so far so good. Now. So I try to explain a little bit of, it's almost like a guide to, oh, you are in Barcelona, have a look at this here. There's a nice thing to look at there, a nice thing to look at there, interesting here, interesting there. Now, if we were to have a look at that link entity, it's empty. And it's empty for the standard reason that any entity set that is defined but has no initial data is going to be empty, right? Maybe the more interesting thing, however, is if we go here, let's open that on a separate there. If we have a look at this, let's have a look at books. So we've got all 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 books. Don't forget we've got, let me open up dollar metadata localhost there. Let me open up dollar metadata here as well, right? Don't forget we've got, in our books entity type, we do have a navigation property, authors. So when we say, give me the books entity set, and expand that navigation property called authors, plural, lowercase, right? In fact, why don't we have just one, books 201. Let's go for not an OData query, but an OData read on a single element, right? Have someone in your life like DJ who looks at metadata. You know what? Right, that's such a good point, right? I don't know about you, but to me, a while ago, the metadata XML of any OData document looked a little bit like, oh my goodness me, why? But once you look at it, it's beauty personified in angled brackets. It's just so perfect, right? And it just tells you everything you need to know. There's nothing there that's sort of not explainable. Right? So embrace it. So we're looking at a single entity here now. Notice that our navigated to property, the navigation property authors, is empty. But in what way is it empty? It's empty in that there's nothing there, but also it's not a scalar value. It's an array of things. And I guess in the same way, let's go to authors, right? Let's pick an author, Emily Brontë, 101. And if we do say $expand equals books, now we know why do we know it's called books? Because in the author's entity type, we have this navigation property, and we know now from this series that $expand is all about following navigation properties, and the navigation property name is books, lowercase, and plural, because we define it as plural because it's a one-to-many relationship in this context, right? We get this extra JSON property here, key books, value, empty array. Same thing. Why is it an empty array? Because it even tells us here, the navigation property target is a collection of an array, right? It's just there. So far, so good. That's there, blah, 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 blah. Right, okay, so now let's resolve that emptiness by adding data. Now, where do we need to add the data? We need to add the data to the link entity. Remember, we've got books, we've got authors, and we've got this link. I don't know why I always think of it as above. Maybe it could be below. Above. Let's have a look. Right. Let's move that down one slight bit. Going from books to the books authors link entity and going from authors, those are both too many associations. And that's why, again, the value of that navigation property is an array of nothingness at the moment, rather than just no value, no scalar. And the associations from books authors to both book and author is a 2-1, okay? And that's why we get there the book ID, the author ID. In fact, we didn't look at this, but basically when we see the view, we see that view and they've both got these generated _ID key fields, right? From the managed association, the managed 2-1 association. So what I've suggested is we're going to restore those relationships we had before, right? So we started out, we know Charlotte Brontë wrote Wuthering Heights, and Emily Brontë wrote Jane Eyre, blah, blah, blah. And also Edgar Allan Poe wrote Eleonora, and also The Raven. In fact, I've linked to The Raven. I thought we'd just have a bit of culture. So we can read The Raven, beautiful poem, later. So let's just grab this. In fact, since GitHub has recently revamped their UI, which is really nice, and now these things here, my Vimium can pick them up. There we go. FK, bang, copy, done. So let's add this sort of pairing, book ID and author ID. That's all we need for this sort of many-to-many managed association. Let's add that into the file db data books author, which doesn't exist yet. So let me do that. We're not going to change. I don't think we're going to change the EDMX. So let's go back here and do it in here, right? So cat into a new file db data books authors.csv. Paste that in there. And now we can see behind my head probably. In fact, we don't really need that one anymore either. So let's get rid of that one. So that should be there, right? Let's put it over there so you can see it a little bit better. There, 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 there. Yeah, so also I've got a new screen setup as well. I can actually see which way I'm pointing now, which is there. There we go. Right, anyway. Where am I? Oh yes, so no change to the EDMX, of course, no change to the SQL. We do have this sort of, in it from DB data books authors. And now, right, well, let's have a look. Let's have a look first of all, before we go and have a look at this, let's go to localhost. Let's look in LinkEntity. We have this, there should be no surprises here. We've got this pairing of IDs, book 201, author 101, right? Notice Edgar Allan Poe wrote the 2, right? So book ID 25, well, you can see there, where I'm just looking, where are the two entities with the same author ID? Author ID 150, that must be Edgar Allan Poe, because that's 150, right? 150 is twice. So he wrote book with ID 251 and book with ID 252. So Visa says, Marian, nope, I still remember the first time I tried to read and understand the relationship between entities in the OData, metadata, XML file. It was a nightmare indeed. Hopefully it's not a nightmare now. Tell me, Visas, how do you feel about the XML now? How do we all feel about EDMX and OData? It's superficially scary, but deep down, it's a thing of beauty. I think I would say that. So, got that, right? In fact, let's bring that over there again, right? Now, it says here, right, we can now traverse, forget that, right? Let's do it here. Let's just put that over there. Let's go back and say books. That's what we did before. And then say what we did before, expand equals, well, author, right? It's not author anymore. That must have been from, Google Chrome history, right? From earlier, right? Navigation property. See, we can press enter knowing that we're going to get an error, but we're not scared of error because we know what the error exactly means. Navigation property, expand works on navigation properties. Navigation property author is not defined in type books. What is it? Of course, it's authors, right? We know because we've looked at the XML, we've looked at the metadata. Authors. Now if we expand authors, we get who wrote Wuthering Heights, who wrote Jane Eyre, who wrote The Raven, who wrote Eleonora, the same person, right? However, this is only like one step of the way, isn't it, right? We've gone from, again, there's books entity, there's authors entity, and above there's LinkEntity. So we've gone from books to the LinkEntity, right? So the LinkEntity has resolved that sort of bit, but from a machine perspective, that's fine. The machine knows that it's author ID 101, but as a human, I want to know the name of that author. So we've gone one step, but we can go another step as well. So up from books to LinkEntity, and then down to authors. Again, up and down is just the way my brain thinks of it. It's not, it's not necessarily correct, but up to the LinkEntity. Let's go down now. It's almost like a step. I think I've described it in the guide as a stepping stone. You're getting over a little stream, and you step into the middle of the stream onto a stone. So we're here. So now we can use the power of OData v4, for example, right? And we did this a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? A couple of episodes ago, to expand the expand. Expand the expand. Could that be the phrase of the day, right? So we can say, take that expanded entity, as in the navigation the thing that we get when we follow the first level navigation property, and expand equals, and what are we going to expand? Author. Let's see what happens. Now. I think I put a question right at the end of the guide. I only put the question this week. And it's come up already in my brain, so let's just think about this. How does that work? What's going on there? Do we know what's going on in this system query option expression, right? Why is it authors and then author? Can somebody tell me? I'll have a drink of coffee. I've got plenty of time. I've just realised this is probably the first time for ages where I'm thinking, I'm not panicking about the time, because every time I look at my watch, it's like, we're getting close to 9 o'clock, but it's only 8:33. It's amazing. Put in the chat why you think the first expand is authors and the second expand is author, singular. And while we obviously the YouTube live stream delay and everything. Hey Daniel, welcome to a sunny morning in Germany. So John Murray is saying author is a navigation property within the LinkEntity. Spot on. Mr. Murray is spot on. Let's answer that question. Actually, let's answer our own question. Maybe I'll localhost 4000. Maybe let's look at the metadata here on this side, right? Well, we've still got that. I want the whole URL in the bar there, right? So we go, first of all, from books. So let's have a look at books. We're starting here. Entity type, name equals books. And we know it's that because it's a capitalized thing, right? And of course, in OData, in the URL conventions, you specify an entity set, right? And that, so really, I suppose I should be pointing at, where is it? I should be pointing at this. This is the thing we're actually asking for. We're asking for an entity set, right? But that entity set, books, is described by the entity type, books within the Z namespace, right? There's the namespace there, Z, which is down here, right? So let's have a look at this. So we say books, and we know that $expand, you need to specify a navigation property. So what is it? Authors. Navigation property, authors. Where does the navigation property authors point to? It points to a collection of, an array of, multiple, there, look, array, there, open square brackets, close square brackets, of Z link entities, of entities of type link entity in the Z namespace. Let's have a look at the link entity type, right? There. There. And just as John has pointed out, author, John says, author is the navigation property within the link entity. Exactly. And so we're going to the link entity from books, and then we go from the link entity, when we expand the navigation property author, singular, because from the link entity to either of the two other entities, it's a 2-1 relationship, right? But don't forget, that's okay, even though we want a many-to-many between the authors and books, because we can have multiple arrows from author, from books to author, or author to books for that matter, between the books entity and the link entity, and then each of those sort of destinations in the link entity points to a specific other one, right? Does that make sense? So we follow that, and it takes us to the type Z authors, which is there, right? ID and name. Z authors is defined based upon this particular entity at the persistence layer, ID and name. There. So we sort of go whoop, whoop, whoop. Now let's have a look at, let's go the other way. Authors, $, X, I can't type, expand. Oh, I've got that. Expand equals books. Right. Now let's pick Mr. Edgar Allan Poe. Right. Authors. Let's go from an OData query operation to an OData read operation. 150. That is like the more. I like that. I prefer that to the old style where you have that in brackets. I don't know why. It amounts to the same thing, but I don't know. From a URL perspective, I just like that better. So now, instead of, in fact, let's go back here. That's what we had before. Let's just pick one book, right? 201, for example. Sorry, /201. Whoop, whoop. We get the author's navigation property, and that's an array. So there we go. Books, authors. I can't go back to the authors. Never mind. Let's do it again. Authors. There. Authors 150. So now we have the books navigation property, which again is an array, right? Because it's a too-many association, because it's to a collection of Z link entities. And those are the two Z link entities, right? So each of those leads to has a 2-1 managed association to the authors. So if we then say within this expand, right? Author, book, sorry, idiot, right? Book. So Edgar Allan Poe wrote The Raven and Eleonora. So Visa says, absolutely, yes, I feel comfortable with the XML right now. Thanks to you, DJ, for these fantastic hands-on sessions. Well, thank you all. We're all learning together, right? If it weren't for the questions and you appearing and everything, we wouldn't learn anything, right? So it's great. So we've now got a way to go through that many-to-many association, right? From many books, from a book to many authors, and from an author to many books. Now, I think the last thing in here, oh, there we go, yes. I thought we could end on a slightly literary note. Of course, Emily Brontë wrote under a pen name, a nom de plume, and that name was Ellis Bell. Now, that's quite interesting that Ellis is like an interesting first name. Anyway, in order to test out whether we can have multiple authors, whether the many-to-many relationship works, we know that we've tested a too-many relationship from author to books. Edgar Allan Poe wrote those 2 books, so we can see it right there. Let's see if we can say, got two authors having co-written a single book, for example. So I think it stands to make sense a little bit in my brain that, let's have Ellis Bell as another author, right? So let's add Ellis Bell to the authors. Let's go across here. How do I do it? There we go. Yeah. I'm still getting used to the VS Code keyboard shortcuts. So if we cat append to DB data bookshops authors, let's append that one. So now we have in the authors, let's go get rid of that. We now have Ellis Bell, 101 and 102, Ellis Bell. And now we want to say, and this is interesting, right? So we know book ID 10, let's go to the books. We know Wuthering Heights is book ID 201. So now we can add, let's do it here actually. Let's bring in link, what's it called? No, what's it called? Books authors.csv, sample db, not sample, books authors, there, that one, right? Let's just add it here, right? Let's say 201, 102, right? So 201 is already in there. So book ID 201 has a relationship with author ID 101. But 201 also has a relationship now with 102. So let's save that. Now, if we refresh that, there's no change. If we have a look at authors, books. Oh, sorry, those are books, sorry, fool. Authors, no change, there's the 102. And if we now also have a look at the link entity, we can now see that there's this new pair of IDs, 201, 102. Now we can say, for example, right, let's go back to authors and say search equals, right, Ellis, so again, or Emily. Now $search, who can tell me where $search appeared in the OData specification or version? 101 and 102. So we can see, yep, we've got those two authors, right? Now down here in the example, we can say, let's have a look at Wuthering Heights. Let's have a look at, for example, books. And then we'll say $filter equals title equals Wuthering Heights. It's me. Heights. There. But now, let's move that across a bit more. Now, we are looking at a specific book entity. Of course, we're still retrieving an entity set because it's an OData query, but that's specific. We can say follow for that thing, for that query result of entities, there's only a single entity, let's $expand authors. Oh, sorry, not ampersand, because we've already got the $filter there. So there we go. You can see Wuthering Heights was written by two authors. And again, we've got this stepping across a stream. We're only in the middle of the stream at the moment. So let's go and take the second step. We've gone from a book to the link entity, right? So now let's resolve those the final sort of step and say in this expand, just like John said before, $expand equals go from the link entity and follow, right, the author singular navigation property of the link entity. But of course that will happen twice because there are two items in this array. We can now see that Wuthering Heights was written by Emily Brontë and Ellis Bell, who's the same person, right? Anyway, so there we go. We now have, through this construction, through this, what's the word I'm looking for? Through this abstraction of a pure key containment that contains keys from the entities that we want to relate in a many-to-many association, we've got a many-to-many type of relationship. That's it. That is it. I think there's nothing else, right? Search Ellis. Oh, let's click on that one and see what happens. Yeah, there we go. So, for example, search Ellis or Emily. Expand equals books. Expand equals book. So find me all those people beginning, Emily or Ellis, and show them the books. And they both wrote Wuthering Heights. Does that make sense? Now, where are we? Where were we? I think. There we go. There's that question that I put at the end. We've already dealt with now, and the one that John answered. Given the URL for this resource, which is this one, let's run it actually. Let's run that. Let's move that there, right? Let's try that again. Oh, there it is, right? How exactly does the expand books expand book? I think when we answered it, it's to do with authors, right? It's the same sort of thing. But again, let's do it again. We're looking, right, at authors' entities. We know that $metadata Z. We know that the author's entity type has this books navigation property. And we know that the books navigation property points to a collection of an array of link entities. And we know that the link entity has a navigation property book, singular. So we expand that. That's it. So John says, Jonas, welcome Jonas. Jonas says, a lot of love for navigations and the ability to use expands to resolve them. Yes. Yeah. That's it. We're going to finish early. Are there any questions? I think we've done managed associations now. I think we should draw a line under managed associations. So in the last few minutes, before dog's barking, I think they must agree. In the last few minutes, tell me in the chat whether we should do some more back to basics. I would like to, but it's always down to you. I'm around next week, so I need to think of a single one-shot live stream episode, because after that, like I said, I'm in Gütersloh doing a code jam, and then I'm away randomly and things, so it might be a bit bumpy over the next few weeks in terms of having a contiguous set of Fridays to do another series. So let's have a think. Maybe next week, let me know what you think as well. Maybe next week, when I did a code jam with Nico in Isnagen, Hanover, a couple of folks said to me that they would like an episode where I just show you the bits and pieces that I use from my dev containers and things like that, and tmux, that sort of thing, and Vim and so on. So let me know. Doesn't have to be that. That could be a one-shot thing. We could have a look at something specific in CAP. Jonah says, do you recommend using link entity definitions for end-to-end relationships? I've implemented a service without that, and it's super easy. There are only certain circumstances where using a link entity makes sense, right? If it's purely a many-to-many. If you can use the direct support from CAP of a pure sort of single step managed association, then do that. This is really only for where CAP doesn't directly support the relationship that you want. And this, the classic example in this case is the many-to-many. So, I'm a big proponent of, getting CAP to do all the heavy lifting for everything, because it's amazing. So Helmut and Jonas says back to basics is always great. Okay, cool. I'll do some more back to basics then. I'll think of something for next week and we'll do it. Okay, well, there's no point in listening to me ramble on anymore. So we're going to finish 10 minutes early. So have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. And definitely see you next week for something. Okay, I'm going to move my mouse over to this other screen because I haven't got my thing and say, okay, bye.